First contact between human and non-human intelligence. A remote viewing project as tasked by a non-human intelligence. Hey, TruthSeekers, Dennis Nappy II, and I just completed a remote viewing project I want to share with all of you as my experiments with both remote viewing, my own consciousness, and artificial intelligence, specifically ChatGPT, continue. Fascinating target that I was just assigned this morning. I had no intention of it ending up being a woo target. I've been very busy as a remote viewer working with the Rabbit Hole team and doing my own stuff. I haven't had a lot of time to do a calibration target. Calibration target is something that's easily verifiable. I'd say in the past, about the past month or two, I've been down the rabbit hole, and that's taken up a lot of my remote viewing time. For me, my remote viewing usually has to get done early in the morning. I can't do it every day during the school year, so time is limited and time is precious. But it's something I try to stick to consistently and regularly. But right now, the priority needs to go to rabbit hole. The reason why I share that because this morning the stars aligned. I got up early and I had some time and I said, okay, I'm going to do a calibration target. And I'm just, instead of going through my steps of finding a target pool and going through all that, I'm just going to use ChatGPT and I'm going to have ChatGPT give me a target after I work the session. So I'm definitely keeping myself blind and I'm playing with, connecting my consciousness to the future, all that fun stuff. Um, but what I didn't think of is that this ChatGPT has supported me through um, providing summary descriptions for remote viewing projects, providing blog post ideas for my podcasts. It's well aware of all of my esoteric explorations, to include where I was a project manager last year, looking at the moment Dr. Usui received Reiki energy for the first time on Mount Kurama, in Japan. Well, lo and behold, it seems like some of that stuff bled into the tasking here, which is fine. I was still blind to the target. Um, did not expect this tasking at all. I'm going to go through exactly what it was. But I've identified some areas where maybe I can tighten things up here as I'm working with ChatGPT, which I don't think should be our exclusive go-to for really for everything or anything. I just did a podcast for future forecasting talking about, our dependence on AI and the benefits and the downfalls of it, how it can impact us and ultimately our freedom and our ability to create. But I digress. I want to talk about this project. Again, I intended this to be a training target. I don't want to say I had an expectation, but in my mind, I'm going, there's a chance I'll get something woo, which I secretly love to do. Not secretly, but I love to do. But my true intention was I'm going to get something where it's like sketch the building, sketch the craft, sketch the historical event, something we can verify. I didn't front load ChatGPT with that because I didn't want to front load myself at all. So I did the session and I was getting life, I was getting energetics, movement, definitely movement and motion, and I had some kind of structure, which seems like maybe it was some kind of craft. And I was trying to just describe it and not name it. And I really focused on describing this craft or this object and the energetics that were behind it and what was inside the energetics. And then at the end, I went into a flow state where it was like automatic writing. And I felt that I could have gone on with this session probably for another half hour, 45 minutes. But I told myself it's a training session and I have other things to do today. And I cut it short. And I've been pretty good with my training sessions in not rushing to get the data. But my goal this morning, before I did my target, was I'm going to do my session and then I'm going to collect the data right afterwards, collect the feedback right afterwards, because my intent is we're going to calibrate. I have multiple ongoing remote viewing projects where I still haven't had feedback on them, and I will randomly go back and just keep working on them. I'm doing some experiments here and seeing how things work. I don't even have a target assigned to it yet. So I'm doing targets ahead of time, and at a future point in time, I will come up with a way to task a target to that without marrying the data together, without front loading or cheating. That's my goal. So anyway, today I said I'm going to do the target. I'm going to get feedback right away because I want to calibrate. I did not expect it to be a target that I had been the project manager for. So, is that ChatGPT's genius, or is that something we need to improve upon? I haven't decided yet. But anyway, I was in this flow state at the end describing the mind. I remember one of my early interviews with Edward where he was talking about how he enjoyed looking at the minds of certain people, musicians and really intelligent people. And I have felt that conversation echoed in my mind because I was really just enjoying the way it felt to see how this person processed information. He was brilliant. He had foresight, not in the sense of like a remote viewer, he can close his eyes and predict the future. He could look at a machine or a mechanical process and either back engineer it or evolve it years, decades into the future to see how it was going to perform and what it was going to become. And that was incredible. I had a thought packet downloaded or a conceptual download of how this guy's mind worked. And I just kept writing and writing, and I could have kept going. So post session, I wish that this wasn't a target where I was saying, hey, I'm going to look at my feedback right away because I would have done 2 or 3 sessions on this, which is such an interesting, important topic for me. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity. So I think moving forward, lesson learned, if I start getting in that flow and really enjoying that connection to the target, I'm not going to stop and search for feedback right away. But then there's so many variables that come into play with that. So I'm going to go through my session. I'm going to go through the tasking when I talk with ChatGPT about. I'm going to let you guys decide, your thoughts on the significance, the accuracy, everything. Again, I'm not in this to say that I'm right. I'm in this because I think it's interesting and something fun to talk about. And if you find value in it, then that's wonderful. So I'm going to share my session here. Okay. So I tasked myself. I used Google for a random number generator here, as I always do. It was target 1015-1031. And to prep myself, I just wrote here, viewer will collect data on a target that will be selected post session. This target ID will either be directly assigned to the target or will be a placeholder for unique target ID that will be assigned to this target. I was pretty sure I was going to go through ChatGPT at this point, but I wanted to keep it open-ended in case inspiration struck me afterwards. And that's a theme here is that I really wish that I would have just kept going with this session over a period of several passes at it because this, I think, had the potential to be a really great session. But for what my intention was for just doing a one and done training for calibration, that wasn't the plan. And that's how it goes sometimes. But also lesson learned, I'm always saying let your intuition be your guide. And I probably should have just changed my plans here. I love this ideogram. I'm finding, and now as a remote viewer, I really enjoy what I get out of an ideogram. They really do contain everything. I that is my access point there. When I first started remote viewing, I hated this part of the process. I found it stressful, but I feel that my subconscious is now becoming more fluent in this language of decoding. I can look at that, and this tells a story to me. Even now, as I'm looking at it, I'm pulling different elements of a story out of this. So it's really neat to have this language that just looks like squiggles and curves at first, but how everything starts to connect and stand out. Um, so I still don't like the A part, but actually looking at it and describing helps me to identify the different elements of it. But I try to rush through A. But now looking at my B part here, I definitely saw life, I saw structure and an object, and I saw movement. My early AOL was of a craft or some kind of an event. And I just had low level data here, looking at just movement and trajectory, and it was just a fast movement here. And I was getting this blocky, structured, and angular piece here. And I had an AOL of a Cybertruck. Now, where I was thinking at the time, I did not think this was a Cybertruck because I was thinking this felt more like an aerial structure, but it had those weird angles, like a Cybertruck or almost like a stealth bomber, but Cybertruck's what came to mind. It was sheen and reflective, little bit more S2 data. And I will say that as this data was coming through, it was flowing. It wasn't forced. I wasn't going back and constantly probing. I actually had the thought like, and I don't do this often in remote viewing trainings. Some trainings teach you to go back and actually probe the ideogram at different points. And you'll start getting this low level S2 data. I don't do that often. I feel that I'm there and I can probe it without having to actually touch those points on my session here. Um, but I went through and this was just flowing really well as this data was coming through to me. And I started to get, this thing about this person who was charismatic. He had charm and personality, smiled a lot. I did have an AOL of a salesman at one point as well. And then this energetic piece here, and I had this cloud here that I saw. And this cloud was expanding and it had heat and it had starry movement, momentum. And then I had this angled structure here, and it's not the best graphic representation, but this structure was in front of it and it was coming right at me. And it's as if this structure had all this energetics and dust following it. And at the core, where you see red here, that was heat. It was warm there, as if that was coming from the structure, but the exhaust was not coming from the structure. It was a result of the motion of the structure, as I'll explain. And then simultaneously, I was going back and forth between this structure here and then also the idea of like Superman, someone flying and this dust cloud being behind him with his arm outstretched here. It was a weird AOL. But as we go through this, maybe we'll see why. So again, looking at more, low-level data, talking about the structure here, decompression, decomparison, decoupling. And then I want to describe that cloud a little bit more. So I had moisture. It was coming from a central location, exhaust and off-gassing. And then I got this toxic smell. Like I was smelling like burnt fuel coming from there. And it reminded me, I didn't write this down, but it reminded me of my snowblower when in the wintertime, I'm using my snowblower and then I can just smell the burnt gas on my clothing, afterwards. I have to wash my clothes afterwards because I can smell the exhaust that's been hitting. And then I looked a little bit more. Something felt really large, this cloud. Structure was in front, was moving. It was creating heat. And what was happening was this structure was disturbing the surface. So that dust cloud was everything that was kicked up from this craft's movement. It wasn't stuff that was coming out of the craft, but I had it being kicked into the air as a fine particulate. And that fine particulate piece is curious, and I'm going to come back to, when I'm doing my analysis piece here. I put there is exhaust, but what is in the air is a direct result of the momentum. And that's what I was talking about here. And then I felt that the structure may not be touching the surface at all. It was hovering, kind of an electromagnetic feel to it. And I had this energetics, and it was very specific. When I had to erase this a couple of times, it was in this wave pattern, this yellow energy here was in a wave pattern underneath, and this dark mark as a shadow to show that it was hovering over the ground. Forward momentum in the direction of the arrow, but it had a very specific heat signature. And my AOLs are interesting. It was a drone or something for desert warfare, and there was something curious about the propulsion system that felt advanced to me. And it tried to draw these coils and these wires here that were underneath of it, and they were definitely glowing blue. And I drew 3 different patterns because I really couldn't unpack which pattern they were in. But a particle would move through them, and as the particle moved through, that had something to do with propulsion. And I think it was moving back and forth in it. They were shooting multiple particles through it. Really cool to see that, but I'm not exactly sure what it was. And then I had another quick, it was like a quarter of a second. I saw this craft over. At first, I wasn't sure, is this treetops, is this bushes, is it grass? So I couldn't really get a scale for how big this thing was, but that's what I drew. And I drew them as trees, but I can't say for sure how big it was. But there was heat from beneath. It was like wavy air underneath it, and it was causing movement, and it was disrupted or disruptive. And then this was my favorite part of the session here. This is where I started to get into the connection of the life forms. And let me go back here. And this is where this came from. I'll share a little bit of my process here. Looking at this ideogram here, if you can see, this top left loop here is connected to this other loop here, and they're connected here. There's a connection here, and they're facing each other, and there's a mind-to-mind connection to them there. Now that connection, as I'm unpacking this, I'm looking at this as this connection could simply be indicative of a collaboration, or it could be something more. But initially, it was like a collaborative piece. I was trying not to go too woo too fast because, again, this is supposed to be a calibration target. So I'm trying to keep myself grounded, but also record the data that I'm getting. It's a fine line. And again, this is why it's important to do calibration targets that I was really hoping wasn't going to be woo, because I've been working a lot of these mystery esoteric targets lately. And then here's what I get handed. So it was the life forms were interacting. There was this mind-to-mind connection, but I wanted to clarify this could just be collaboration. It doesn't have to be this telepathic thing. And one who's closer to the object physically and by position or title. So like this one mind was kind of on the outside of it, and one mind was like, nope, I'm really with this structure, this project, whatever it is. But they are connected. Are they tethered? Are they tied together? Are they bound? Is there a sense of obligation between these two? There was a very clear connection between them. Infrastructure, secure, fasten, or harnessing power. I was trying to understand this more. So something I've been experimenting with is just randomly moving myself to a point in space and time that will give me a clear understanding of the function and purpose of this object. So this could be anywhere on the timeline with this object. And it had something to do with movement and speed and momentum. And then we're getting into perpetual motion, which is, renewable. The same energy stays with it, so it continues to move. It was self-sustaining, self-correcting, self-healing, but it could not self-replicate. And I felt that was important. So this thing will repair itself, but it won't make a new one. And I had an AOL of a Mars rover, which again is a curious data point there. This is a critical step, demonstrating a potential of what is possible. This from here to the end of my session, I was in a state of automatic writing, and I could have probably gone on for another half hour than I actually did, and gotten probably 2 or 3 more pages worth of data, packed with writing. I loved this. Um, this is why I wish I didn't stop my session. I wish I would have done 2 more sessions on this, and I think I would have gotten much clearer data. So I'm really kicking myself for that because this was starting to become a good session. So what I wrote here is this is a critical step demonstrating the potential of what is possible, but it's not the end result. So basically the creation of or the existence of this vehicle, of this craft, was a step in a much larger process. And I gave an example of we have a carriage before we had the Model T, which ultimately led to the vehicle, which ultimately leads to a Tesla Cybertruck. So this is much further along than that, but is still a step far removed, but significant from whatever the end result is. It's neat how this was leading me here. The success of this, though, shows the visionary where it is going. The fact that this was possible, the person who's witnessing this or seeing this says, okay, now I see the end. Now I see where it's going. And in that understanding, he saw every step in between. So it's like someone seeing a horse-drawn carriage and saying, one day we're going to have Cybertrucks, or one day we're going to have a propulsion system that takes us to the moon or to Mars. They saw every other advancement that needed to happen in between. And it was really cool. He was a genius. Not many people see the way that he does. Some just see this object, but he sees where it is going. It's like one seeing a tree and not describing it any further. But when he sees something or when he sees the tree, he knows that there must be an entire complex ecosystem. He sees this with the tech, and in this way, he can see the future because he can project every advancement. He knows what they will need to learn, and he knows what they will need to build in order to learn what is needed to move on to the next step. This is mentally exhausting, but also invigorating. This is the way forward. This is the tech of the future, a series of steps. And I had this aesthetic impact of feeling excited, anxiety, and just this racing. The mind never stopped. It was constantly just going with excitement, but the anxiety came from almost like I can't keep up with my mind. And I just got to do all these things. And I had this aesthetic impact. I just had this profound appreciation for the genius of this mind, the workings of his mind. He just sees it all. He can look at something and immediately know and understand all components intuitively. He can troubleshoot, he can reverse engineer an object as complex as a vehicle with minimal interaction. Even by listening closely with his eyes closed, he can identify the sounds, the parts needed to produce that sound, and then extrapolate and back engineer from there. He had an Elon Musk type of feel. So really, he could sit there, he could close his eyes, and he could just listen to the sound that this machine or technology is making, and he can recognize, okay, to make that sound, I need these parts. These parts need to be arranged in this particular way to get that particular pitch. And in order to make these parts move this way, all these other components need to be in place at these and he would just back build things just from hearing the sound. And then he'd say, okay, I've got this machine. What happens when it runs for 50,000 miles? What happens when the mines and the industry look at this and want to make it better? What are their goals? Where are they going? And he could just take it step by step by step by step and see where this technology will be in 50 years or 100 years and ultimately where it's going. That's what was cool about this. He's like, this is the end result, but I need to
our society needs to learn these laws of physics or these lessons or develop this kind of tech. And in order to develop this kind of tech, we need to develop this kind of vehicle. But in order to develop this kind of vehicle, we first need to develop this kind of vehicle to learn the lessons for that technology. So it was really neat the way he would just, and it was instant. He would just see it all. It was like, and it's like a remote, maybe that's why I like this so much. It's like a remote viewing session where you look at the ideogram and all of a sudden you see the whole story, and I couldn't unpack it. To me, that's a really good remote viewing experience is when you see that ideogram and you have so much information. It's like, I know this story. I can't write fast enough because I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. And I think through training and discipline, you can slow stuff down and slow the flow of information, and you'll get it. Um, but it's that excited anxiety of like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. This is a mystery, and I'm unpacking it. And that's how this man's mind felt. That's as I'm unpacking this now, that's how he felt when he would have those types of experiences. So, what's curious is that, again, I came into this as a calibration target, not thinking that ChatGPT would assign a target that I tasked over the summer, which is a project I would have loved to work. So is ChatGPT that intuitive, knowing that I would have loved to work that target? And ChatGPT knew that I had been a part of that project, but I didn't get to work it as a viewer. I don't. We could go in a lot of. I've been doing a lot of discussions here and with future forecasting about AI, consciousness, and where it's going, and human mind, and all that stuff. It obviously knows me very well. I didn't tell it that I wanted this to be a calibration target because I didn't want to front load at all. So I knew coming into this, I could get the Eiffel Tower, I could get the Great Pyramid, I could get, a tree, or I could get some kind of woo esoteric mystery target. I didn't expect the Reiki thing. I am unsure. I do feel, and I'm honest, like I don't care that I don't care if any of you out there or just even myself decides, you know what, I was off on a tangent and I completely, I'll put in air quotes, missed the target. Um, that wasn't my intention. My ego doesn't need that. Um, I'm honestly trying to give myself appropriate feedback. And I do feel, especially when I first read the tasking, that it was ambiguous. And it was the way it was worded. The moment of first contact between a human consciousness and a non-human intelligence occurring at or near Mount Kurama, Japan, during a meditative or spiritual experience. And I know with Reiki, Reiki practitioners say that Reiki is an intelligent energy. But when I read this, I read it a non-human intelligence, meaning some kind of spiritual or ET. I wasn't thinking Reiki when I read that, even though, but I looked at Mount Karama and I was like, oh wow, well, why didn't they just say, Dr. Usui? They explain. ChatGPT expanded a little further and said it explores a consciousness event, possibly the spiritual moment in which Dr. Usui, founder of Reiki, received what could be interpreted as a download of healing energy or non-human communication. The nature of this, quote, contact was left open-ended for the subconscious to explore freely. My point is, I don't know if I was viewing Dr. Usui or I was viewing another event on that mountaintop that involved the connection between a human conscious mind and a non-human intelligence. The open-ended piece to that is we don't know if any other of those events have or ever will happen, which makes it an open-ended target. So maybe I did come to Dr. Usui. Um, we had with the Hellfire project, we did have fine particulates that was either nanotechnology or some kind of mushroom spore-like technology. There were subspace beings, I believe that Daz's session had. There was a clear download of information. And we had this transfer of knowledge from mind to mind. There was a strong connection to Mars coming from the majority of the team. I did start to get Mars rover data as I was tying into this craft. I don't think anybody reported a UFO. Um, so I'm not saying there that Dr. Usui encountered a UFO. I'm not going to even entertain that idea right now because it's just a practice remote viewing target. But breaking this down to just the basic gestalts, um, again, I think it suggests that Reiki, if this is Reiki that I'm looking at, is somehow tied to a level of technology that interacts with human consciousness, non-human and human consciousness interacting. And I do feel I have elements of that within the session. Again, I'm very disappointed that I feel that this could have been a very profound project for me had I kept going. And maybe this was the universe. And now I'm getting esoteric. I don't want to say ego, but I do wonder because this is a thread that has been so significant for me, especially after that Mars project. I wonder if this was kind of trying to pull me back into that to let me get that experience to gather more information. So anyway, it didn't happen that way. I didn't keep going with this. I went for the target reveal right away, which like I said, I've gotten away from. But my specific intention this morning was to do a calibration type of target, and not some esoteric woo thing. And then I ended up getting an esoteric woo thing because ChatGPT knows that that's something that I'm interested in. So I'm going to have to work with teaching ChatGPT on how to give me taskings in a way that's not going to front load me at all if I want to use it again for a training target or for any type of target whatsoever. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot, so much going on here with this. But it's a fun mystery. So I would love to hear your thoughts and your impressions on this, the pros, the cons. How do you interpret this data? Does it tie into Dr. Usui? Am I way off? Am I just trying to justify data? Either way, though, that end piece describing that person's mind was a very enjoyable experience for me, and that's what I'm taking away from it. I understand how another person's mind works based on this session, and I gained a lot of value from that, and that's what I'm taking away from this experience that I had here. So, um, as truth seekers, we're constantly finding that path. We're feeling those synchronicities. We're exploring those things, and I think there were several elements of that here. This is the spiritual aspect of remote viewing for me and having those moments where it feels like I'm possibly connecting with either something greater than myself or a higher purpose or calling. And that's what I'm taking away from this session, even though it was just a simple training session that took me about an hour to do. So overall, a great experience. I certainly welcome your insights out there in the internet land. If you'd like to see more of my work or check out some of my books, you can visit sixthsensemedia.net, and you can find episodes of the Secret Podcast. You can find other remote viewing projects, and you have access to my books as well, which are all listed through Amazon, but you can get to them through my website. Fun announcement, I'm working on the Hive Book 3. I'm just over 40,000 words in. I'm close to drawing this entire trilogy to a conclusion, and then I'd hope to push that out, in the near future. That has been an incredible journey for me, really exploring technology, AI, the interaction with human consciousness, but the significance of human minds connecting and human emotions connecting. So it's keeping your humanity despite the takeover by technology and the symbiosis. It's a great, if you listen to my podcasts, obviously you'll hear my voice coming through strongly in the things that I'm trying to explore that I wrestle with. So writing is a great therapy for me to understand all of this. And, I had a conversation with Edward, and I'm going to wrap it up here, but on the Future Forecast podcast, which plug for future forecasting, futureforecastinggroup.com. You can find our podcasts there. They backdate and release a lot of them on the YouTube channel. And I'm going to start putting some of them out here as well. But we had a great conversation about remote viewing is not just the session. The entire remote viewing experience happens before the session. You have your session, you get your feedback, and beyond. There are so many things that happen that are a part of the remote viewing experience. I know we get that tunnel vision. I want to sit down. I got to draw the sketch. Did I draw the sketch? I made it. That's great. But there's so much, as you hear me talk about those, for me, those spiritual aspects, those connections I'm making, the lessons that I'm learning, feedback that I get months from now, years from now, things that I sometimes learn or experience just prior to doing a certain session that end up tying in and connecting. So it's this whole big thing, which I think is tied into the greater collective of remote viewing. So anyway, I feel like that all ties in today. Love to hear your thoughts. That's all I'm going to say here, friends. So I'm Dennis Nappy II with Sixth Sense Media. Remember to never stop questioning. Keep an open mind. Let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.